Welcome, everyone, to the third annual LogiCal-LA conference. So let's be clear about what this conference is about, and what exactly is scientific skepticism. Briefly stated by Paul Kurtz, one of the giants of scientific skepticism, a skeptic is one who is willing to question any claim to truth, asking for clarity in definition, consistency and logic, and adequacy of evidence. The use of skepticism is thus an essential part of objective scientific inquiry and the search for reliable knowledge. Carl Sagan said, "Science is a way of skeptically interrogating the universe with a fine understanding of human fallibility. If we are not able to ask skeptical questions, to interrogate those who tell us that something is true, to be skeptical of those of authority, then we're up for grabs for the next charlatan, political or religious, who comes ambling along." At the heart of this movement is the quest for truth using scientific inquiry. With so much pseudoscience, we need a methodology that can be used to tell us not if a claim is 100% true, but to examine if a claim is most likely true. In other words, to provisionally believe a claim is true until more compelling evidence is presented. Science and scientific research can and will improve our understanding of social issues as well. But there is one issue that is overriding all of these issues. It's climate change. We are placing the human race in a precarious position for future generations as we ignore the prognosis of the world as a whole. As the SGU, Skeptics Guide to the Universe, said several weeks ago on one of their podcasts, this generation is the one who must start to change our planet. It will be much more difficult for the future generations to make a significant change without doubling or tripling the cost to make that change. And most of the current world issues will diminish because all efforts will be placed on saving our planet. We should help other carbon-intensive countries change to a carbon-neutral energy sources. We hope you enjoy the stimulating lectures that our speakers have to offer. Later, but I'm going to be introducing the next speaker. Her name is Betty Lacy. She's a psychiatrist who will be presenting a talk on contemporary development in brain health. She will explore the relationship between genetic and epigenetic phenomena, previously referred to as nurture versus nature, and maintaining a healthy brain and creating cognitive resiliency. Okay, that's a formal part. Now, this next woman who's about to speak has a mother that has advanced dementia, Alzheimer's, and I happen to have a mother that also has advanced dementia, as known as Alzheimer's. I have had my genes tested. I know where I stand in the percentage of risk that I have, and she also has done that among her sister, who happens to be behind Betty Lacy. You can see that little blonde over there. That's Shelley, my sister, because the next speaker is my sister, Betty Lacy. Let's welcome her.
All right, Mark. Get those blue and red flags up. Come on. Let's see them. Okay. Now put them down. Such power, you know? Such power. Okay. I love it. Let's go.
The number one fear of most Americans is public speaking. Get your flags up.
Okay, that's about half, yeah.
So about 50-50, huh? I don't get that one because I would think, like axe murderers would be on the list somewhere, but what do I know, okay? All right, the other one is the population who carry the gene that causes the most risk for late onset Alzheimer's disease will get the disease. Get your flags up. Blue first. Blue first.
Blue first. How many believe that? If you have the gene, the at-risk gene? One person. Very good. All right.
So?
Okay, with that, thank you, Mark.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
See you later.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm Betty Lacy. I am going to be talking about cognitive health and dementia prevention. Oh, Bruce, let's see. Okay, we're going to continue with a little trivia, and if you recognize this tune, sing along or hum along with me. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Okay, what's that too? Yes, bonanza. Okay. So why is it that we can oh wow, I can't do two things at once here. Why is it that we can remember something 50 or 60 years ago that we learned and we forget where we put our keys? Okay. So that is not what I'm going to talk about today, but that demonstrates really that there is so much information out there right now. As you can see from this slide, I just pulled off a bunch of things off from my bookcase and took a picture of it. But there is a lot of information, and so how to make sense of the information, what is the evidence-based practices, and how can we learn from it and protect our brain. So today's talk is actually going to focus on what is dementia. I know, again, you're frothing at the mouth to know about dementia. My own personal wake-up call to really begin to look at why I am frothing at the mouth. And then the genetics and epigenetics. Again, those genetics being the hardware in our cells, the epigenetics, what we can do to influence that, the software, what you can do to prevent dementia, and evidence practices to protect your brain. Oh, I keep going forward further. Okay, so let's define dementia first. So dementia is not only memory and cognitive impairment, it's actually impairment in behavior, in personality, and of course, in judgment. And so that is a big one, but most people associate it just with memory. Now, there are many different types of dementia, Alzheimer's being the number one, and most people use these terms interchangeably, but really they're very different. Again, dementia being the umbrella term, these are the different types. Alzheimer's at 60 to 80%. Alcoholism, on the rise, people, 10 to 40%. Vascular dementia, 10%, that's one that you've probably heard of due to strokes. Frontal temporal dementia, and Lewy body dementia. Now, the problem with all of these dementias, and this is really just a small list, there's about 40 different dementias, and what are the reasons for these dementias? Well, before we do that, let's talk about statistics. So there are currently 5.8 million people in the United States. That's a diagnosis made about every 65 seconds. And in the world, we have about 50 million. That's a diagnosis about every 3 seconds. So dementia over the next 20 years is expected to triple. 2/3 of the cases are women, and 1 out of every 2 people, if you turn to your neighbor at the table, and let's project your age until 85, and most of you might be around baby boomer, and maybe a little younger, but let's say you're 85, 1 or 2 of you, one or the other one, will have dementia. So this is on the rise. These are statistics from the Alzheimer's Organization. But let's just look at the statistics in our room. So would you please stand, if you feel comfortable, if you have a family member with Alzheimer's or dementia? Would you please stand a moment? Okay, look around. Now, please stay standing. The people who know someone with dementia, not in your immediate family, but you know someone with dementia, please stand. Look around, please. Okay, well, that's why I'm here. You can see why it's affecting virtually everyone in this room. That's pretty significant considering we don't talk about it very much, right? So when I asked earlier, what is the number one fear? Well, you can tell I'm a little shaky. So yes, it used to be public speaking, but it's actually fear of losing our memory and fear of losing our cognition. So you might ask then, okay, why now? Why is this happening now? So people recognize the scream. Anybody feel like screaming with me? Ah! Little Tarzan scream. Okay, we are an aging population. That is what's causing the increase in dementia. So, matter of fact, statistically, by the time 2035 rolls around, for those of you that that will be with us. The projected rate of people 65 and over will be larger for the first time in the world than people 18 and younger. So this is not going away, our aging population. So we've got to find a way to deal with this better. Okay, so let's look at the root causes of dementia. First off is insulin resistance. That's a precursor to diabetes. Have people heard about insulin resistance? You have, good, very good, because this is often a biomarker, a laboratory value that many doctors do not measure. I recommend that people do measure this. So inflammation leading to diabetes, root cause of dementia, inflammation. Inflammation is a lot in the news now. And then third, the increase in breakdown in cells is greater as we age than the growth of cells. And then our sensitivity to toxins, to chemicals, biological, physical, the whole information on chronic traumatic encephalopathy due to sports injuries, particularly football and boxing, that has been really well researched. We know that this is definitely on the rise. So synaptic dysfunction, again, something that happens more when we age. All right, so let me switch now gears to dementia, my story. It's a personal story. So my wake-up call began when I was 10 years old, and my grandmother, who had come to live with us, left the stove on. And so she could no longer live with us. And so my mother and father decided to move her to a nursing home. And that was when I was 10, and we would go and visit my mom, since I'm the oldest. I guess I should say that straight out, since I have my siblings here, that I remember those visits very well, because for those of you that stood earlier, you know how dementia is. It's a crippling, horrific disease. And that's my grandmother there, and the first, I don't know how I can point to that, but the first one with the kind of flapper hat on, it's my grandmother and my grandfather, both of whom had dementia. So visiting my grandmother was very traumatic. That was my wake-up call. My mother would come home crying. I would come home very confused. My grandmother didn't know who she was or who my mother was at that particular time. So eventually, that was when I was 10. You'd think I'd be a little bit worried about that, but I really wasn't too worried about it until both my parents developed dementia. And there is my mother and father over, you can see the youngest ones. Here we go. So there's my mother, Bruce was talking about, and my father. Here is my grandfather, my maternal grandfather. This is, by the way, I'll just call them by their proper names. This is Tiny Nanny, yes, because she was petite. And here is her husband, Grandpa. Here is Hi Nanny, because she was tall, right? Very good. Here's Amelia. Boy, this is such a smart group, isn't it? So here is my great-grandmother, who also had Alzheimer's disease, my grandmother and mother and uncle. Here's my uncle, who was diagnosed some time ago and died about 5 years ago. And then my parents. Now, I want to clarify, not everybody here has Alzheimer's disease, but there is a preponderance of Alzheimer's disease in our family. My father was one of those people I mentioned earlier. He was diagnosed with alcoholism and a combination of stroke and dementia due to that. So I mentioned fear earlier. The number one fear is actually Alzheimer's disease in many of us. So as you were talking, Glenn, about that change and collaboration over time with people, that we know now that public speaking, although really difficult, we have much more worries around, again, our cognitive health. So my mission really now is to begin to save my brain cells and to help you save yours. So we'll switch now to genes. So I told you my family history, my wake-up call, and one of the things that I began to study and research, because I wasn't getting many answers from the medical establishment, even though our parents were at very well-regarded academic centers for their care, I began to find out about this gene. It's called the APOE4 gene. It's a cholesterol transport gene. And lo and behold, it has 17 interactions in the body. So I began to look at that and discover that this is the most at-risk gene that one can have for late onset Alzheimer's. Early onset Alzheimer's is a whole other set of dynamics, which is too much time to spend on today. But the late onset Alzheimer's, we know, is most at risk with the APOE4 gene. Now, there are 60 genes now that have been identified when they come together to actually cause late onset Alzheimer's disease. But the APOE3/4 has the greatest risk. I'm actually just going to go back here a second. Oh, there it comes. Okay. All right. So we're talking about genes. So what can we do about that APOE4 gene? So we know that we cannot change our genes. That's the hard wiring in our cells. But we know that we can influence how they are expressed. So every good poker player, any poker players in here? None at the speaker table? I'm surprised. Okay. No poker players. Oh, there's a couple. Okay. Poker players know it's not the cards you're dealt, right? It's the way you play those cards. So epigenetics is really about the way we're going to play these cards. So we began to look at, or I began to look at, various studies that were done around the epigenetic phenomena, knowing that we couldn't change that APOE4 gene that both my parents carried. What could we do about it? So the first study I became aware of in 2014 was done at UCLA, a small study, albeit. It's the first thing my brother said when I brought it to his attention. Too small, Betty, not even going to look at it. No randomized control, people, done. You know, don't even talk to me about it. But this actually began, the epigenetic was really the beginning of epigenetic studies involving actual clients and not mice with Alzheimer's disease. And what they found is, provided an intensive program, that 9 out of 10 people actually improved their cognitive health. And actually in some memory disturbed clients, impaired clients, they actually were able to reverse that. So in 2015, a Finnish study that's famously known in brain health circles as the FINGER study was an interventional study based on a multi-domain program where they took various kinds of domains like sleep, learning, education, diet, and they put them all into a program, and then they put two groups out of 1,200 people, divided them in half. One was an interventional study where they really gave a lot of information and checked biomarkers and did cognitive testing. And then the other one had virtually no education, no information supplied. And then they measured their cognitive tests. What they found is that the people that were in that intervention study actually improved their cognition, reducing their memory impairment. So the next study that was done in 2018, I told you about that UCLA study. The 2018 study took 100 clients. So before they just had 10, they bumped it up to 100, and they used the same multi-domain, again, more epigenetic factors that they're playing with there. And they, again, documented improved cognition in all 100 clients. Now, just last week, JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association, actually put out a healthy lifestyle, finished up their research done over 8 years, that looked at really offsetting that genetic risk that I carry, and that actually 25% of the American populace carries this gene of the APOE4 gene. So you can see many of us are at risk and not even knowing it. So what do we want to do with this information? Well, for me, it began to change the narrative that I had, the narrative that I was told virtually by many doctors and nurses and care providers for both my parents, which is there's nothing you can do. Have anybody heard that? That's been still a dominant narrative. To now, let's change it to dementia may be preventable, may be reversible, but certainly is treatable from the research that I just provided you. So let's look at the epigenetic phenomena and let's play these cards. So first is sleep, second is learning, third is exercise, fourth is diet, socialization, then stress. If you look at and put together an acronym here, anybody see it? SLEDS, yes, Glenn knows because we had our speaker meeting last night. So, okay, SLED, so that's a good way for everybody to remember. I don't know about you, I come away from these conferences going, oh, my head hurts. A lot of learning going on today, which is great, but sometimes it's easy to have acronyms that help us. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is switch into first what we know statistically and evidence-wise, research-wise about brain health and these various epigenetic domains that were tested in many of the studies I just provided you. And then we'll switch to what we can do about it, okay? I want you to be able to leave here with a sense of, okay, I can do some of these things, or if I run up or in conversation with people, I can tell them that there are some things. And this is really spelled out in the new science and new medical practice of brain health, which again is kind of very few people in it, but we're starting to rise in numbers, again, because of our aging population. Okay, so first, I love this first sentence by Matthew Walker. I heard him interviewed last year and have his book, Why We Sleep. Sleep is the greatest legal performance drug, enhancing drug that most of us are probably neglecting. So sleep is part of, I'm a psychiatrist before I went into brain health, and sleep was always part of my questionnaire. Because you know why? If people are not sleeping, what happens to their mood? Drops, right? And also they get not only depressed, but usually very anxious, not able to focus and concentrate. So we really want to check that sleep out. We don't want to just hand out antidepressants that so many people do. So as we age, another most important finding is that stage 4, you go into multiple stages of sleep, but in stage 4 sleep, that's when your memories consolidate. So if you're not getting that deep sleep, again, that reduces with age, makes sense, then you're putting your memory and your cognition at risk, and even your concentration and focusedness. So then if you, okay, I know some of you are not going to like this next one. 1 hour of cell phone usage before bed will delay the onset of melatonin production by about 3 hours. What does melatonin do? It puts you to sleep. It's your natural hormone. So, and then melatonin levels will suffer and be about 50% less. And then finally, a really important finding, which is beta amyloid, one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease found in the brain, is actually increased after 1 night of sleep deprivation. Yeah, that was like scream for me. Okay, so sleep, what can you do about it? You want to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. You want to avoid that blue light. After dark, I actually use blue light blocking glasses a lot. My husband says I look kind of like Mario Andretti, so we like that. Let's see, we get up and go to bed at the same time. We get a sleep study. If you are not sleeping and you try other modalities to improve your sleep, then you need to get a sleep study. And then you need to avoid that alcohol 3 to 4 hours before bed. A lot of us think, I certainly had this myth, that alcohol would put me to sleep, but actually alcohol relaxes you and yes, allows you to go to sleep, but guess what happens after 3 or 4 hours? The effects wane off and you wake up. And your stage 4, again, and many of your stages of sleep actually are altered with alcohol. And exercise, we know, definitely normalizes more negative sleep patterns, so very important there. Okay, second one, L for learning. So we want to learn about your labs, which are your biomarkers, and we want to just learn, period. So what do we know about the brain? It's a muscle, right? So if we exercise the muscle, it gets bigger, and size does matter in brain health. So neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections in life. Did anybody grow up with this idea that the brain didn't change? Yeah, I mean, that's what I grew up with. 16, that was it. You were nailed. Your personality was written in stone. So we know that's absolutely false now. Thank goodness to what we used to call the theory of neuroplasticity, but now it's very clearly true. We can see those neurons increasing on functional MRIs. So, and next off, a new word for me, I don't know if anybody else has heard this, of hormesis. So hormesis is when we provide a little bit of strength to muscle training. You know, when you're, anybody lifting weights in here? So yeah, if you do some weightlifting, you're like breaking those muscle fibers. That's an example of hormesis, and then those fibers grow back in a strong way. A perfect metaphor for how the brain is functioning when you're putting it under a little bit of positive stress. So what that means is those people with actually more of a sedentary lifestyle are really at risk for cognitive impairment and memory impairment. So okay, we learned a little bit about learning and how important it is. What can you do to improve your brain health? So lots of studies in this area, novel activities. Novel, new is the important word here. A new instrument, a new language, crafts, dance, and then apply the hormesis strategy. Stay with it. Stress yourself a little bit. Really, really work. Give your brain, don't you ever feel like that? You know, you're working your brain and you're like, wow, this feels really good, like I'm really opening up some passages here. So, and that's exactly what's happening with hormesis. So, secondarily here, learn what your biomarkers are for your optimal brain health. There's a lot of controversy about this, but basically looking at vitamin levels, blood sugar, insulin, as I mentioned, cholesterol, inflammation. We have so many more discoveries now so that we can look at things in much more depth and give us a greater idea of people's risk of dementia and how to ameliorate it. Okay, exercise. One of the most common, one of the most common, I'm just going to say most researched domains really in terms of brain health. So first off, we know that women who have a high degree of physical fitness in midlife actually have a 90% less likely to develop dementia. And that was March of 2018. There was an older study, I think somebody, was it Thomas, mentioned John Ratty's. This is John Ratty's work that he calls out in his book called Spark. It's totally about exercise and brain health. And so this is showing that actually when we exercise, we have greater vocabulary. People ever feel that? Greater vocabulary, greater creativity. All of these things have been greatly researched. And we may even have some correlation, what's called BDNF. BDNF stands for brain-derived neurotropic factor. It's like Miracle-Grow for the brain. And we can measure this, but generally we're measuring it at academic centers. At some point, we're really hoping to have that out into the public realm. And finally, moderate exercise, just this last year in the Harvard newsletter, over 6 months was associated with selected brain volume increases. And that's really what we want to see. We want to see that brain grow as we age. We don't want to see it shrink. So what can you do to improve brain health? What are the evidence-based practices based on what we know from research? Well, first off, a lot of people come to me and say, hey, listen, Dr. Lacy, I've been exercising a lot, but you know, my diet still has a lot to be desired. And I'm like, you can't exercise your way out of a bad diet. You got to work with the brain with multi-domained areas, not just one or two. So keep that exercise up. And I know my family will like this one. The trifecta of exercise for brain health is, see it up there? I'll give you a little. Okay, this is my brother's favorite activity, and really our family. We all love to dance in our family. We definitely got that from my mother. My father does not like to dance. Trifecta, so why would it be the trifecta? So it's hitting learning, it's hitting exercise, and it's hitting socialization. So it's hitting three major factors, three major domains, and where's Pete? Where's Peter? Pete, there you are. Is he back in the table? Is he already left? Okay, well, he's a Scottish dancer. We met him last night at the speakers gathering, and he's a perfect example of somebody who's still thriving and doing well. I'd love to do a little MRI of his brain to see how he is because he's looking really good. Okay, Okay, another question people often ask me is, okay, how much exercise do I really need? I know I need to exercise, but how much do I really need? And so the statistics are really clear, number of meta-analyses that really prove this point, which is 150 minutes a week of aerobic activity. There's an aerobic zone for your health that you can look up. It's actually on my website, but you can look up aerobic zone, Google it. So you know if you're getting that heart muscle, but mostly you'll know if you're just having a lot of heavy breathing, okay? Then 2 days of strength training, so there's your week. Oh, that's all you gotta do. No, you gotta do a lot more. So you wanna really, let's just create movement. You know, like I said, I don't want to just stand at the podium, I wanna move around and burning calories, and I'm exercising my brain as I do this talk because I have a little hormesis going on. So get a Fitbit and track your progress. That's super important. How many people have Fitbits here? Oh, that's pretty good. Okay. Okay, so epigenetics, this is our playing card of diet. And so what do we know about diet? So we know that there's a lot of diets out there, right? There's paleo, there's vegetarian, there's the DASH, there's keto. What's the best one for me? Well, what I say to people when I get asked that is, what's best for you is the one that fits your lifestyle, but also correlates with your blood and biomarkers, okay, and your overall brain health exams. So we know over time, carbohydrate intolerance develops as we age. So we gotta go down with that, people. I mean, I'm not saying stop all carbs, they're not evil, but we do need to get down on the carbs, particularly as we age. I mentioned the insulin resistance. We know that diabetes is soon to affect 50%. Again, look to your neighbor. One or the other one is gonna have diabetes in 10 years if we keep going the way that we are. And that actually definitely increases memory impairment and cognitive dysfunction. So let's lower that, and then refined and processed foods also. Remember the second value for a root cause of dementia. First was insulin resistance, second, inflammation. So inflammation is caused often by processed, refined foods. They provoke more inflammation in the gut. And those pot bellies, I'm not like pointing to anybody, okay? But that is a sign of visceral inflammation. Fat gathers around the organs. That is the most toxic kind of inflammation you can have. Eventually, that's going to reach your brain, and eventually, you will see some blood values go up with regard to inflammation monitoring. Finally, alcohol, sorry to report, neurotoxic. I know it's supposed to get you laughing and smiling and socializing more. I know, and it probably does. But we know that it's just not great for the brain. So the message there is, as we age, you might have been a 2 drink a night or 3 drink a night, whatever, but as we age, we're really going to have to cut down on the alcohol. Okay, what do we know now about that particular research? We know, I love Michael Pollan's quote, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Eat organic, eat fiber, eat low carbohydrate. Establish an eating window. This is the new trend right now that has been borne out in studies regarding particularly that inflammation factor. When we see intermittent fasting done in clients, that we do see the inflammation factors come down. I like an eating window to start out with clients at 12 hours. So that means that's pretty easy. Stop eating at 7. Don't start eating until 7 the next morning. I mean, that's like slam dunk, not a big deal. And then we can just increase that gradually to where you're up to more like 10 or 8 hours, where you're only eating during those times, okay? Eat mostly from a wide range of diverse plants, moderate protein, and healthy fats. You know, it's really the low-fat diet, as we all know, and high sugar that really got us partly into this whole mess that we're in right now, particularly with diabetes and then dementia. So we want to ultimately, as I mentioned, use your biomarkers with preferably somebody who knows something about brain health. And I'm going to have to just be honest with you, you're going to have to search that out because there's not a lot of us out there. And medicine is functioning in this area about 20 or 30 years behind what current research is providing us. Okay, next off, diet. SLEDS. Okay, socialization, what we know about brain health. We know that isolation is really common in the elderly, right, Hector? And that lack of socialization leads to depression and anxiety, and that depression and anxiety and even trauma can increase rates of dementia. So socialization is stimulating, provocative to learning, so we want to increase that. So stay connected, be involved, be in loving and supported relationships, and be in your community, be involved in your community, and try out all those clubs that are available. Stop working so much. I don't have that on here, but I guess I could add another S there. Epigenetic, stress reduction. We know a lot about stress reduction and how that's helping. We know that chronic stress also is responsible for memory impairment. Living in unhealthy environments increases dementia. Being in toxic relationships increases dementia. And if you have an increased stress, it's very clear the results on increase in cardiovascular disease. You have bad heart health, you're definitely going to have bad brain health. So, okay, what can you do? Well, stress reduction, a lot of things you can do. Actually, I don't have exercise on here, but these are all practical exercises. One is practice meditation, lots of apps. We were talking about apps earlier. Practice inquiry and curiosity, which that's kind of why I'm here, to help you remind yourself to inquire and be curious. And you're all skeptics, so you guys are already one step ahead of the game. You can ask, I like Byron Katie's 4 questions. The work, Heart Math is a well-researched program of biofeedback that reduces heart rate and works with coherence factors. Yoga, Tai Chi, notice your triggers, pick your battles. I'm ending here now. First, wealth is health, and this presentation is dedicated to my parents, both of whom have dementia. And finally, I hope that you're able to now take away some of the epigenetic things that you all can do to improve your brain health, that you spread the word, that we're changing the narrative from there is nothing you can do to there are many things you can do to improve your brain health. Thank you very much.